Hello, everyone, and welcome back to this episode of the Bridging Impact Podcast. I'm your host, Justin Furtado, and in today's episode, I interview Rob Ryan, founder and CEO of Growth Hacks. In our conversation today, we dive into redefining what mentorship means, the power of communication and connection across local, regional, and global audiences, and last but not least, the power of building bridges and finding a why. So, without further ado, let's dive in. Hello and welcome to the Bridging Impact Podcast, Rob. I'm thrilled to have you on today. I'm thrilled to have our conversation on building relationships and connections locally, regionally, and globally, and how that pertains to growth hacks and all of your experience and stories that you have come through along the way while we pass this information on to the young coaches, teachers, and leaders who are listening to this podcast today. How I always like to start this podcast is by asking you, what is your definition of impactful leadership, and then how does it show up in your daily work with growth hacks?
Awesome. Great question. And thanks for having me, Justin. Happy to be a part of helping you kickstart this whole adventure. Right, so there's nothing greater than passing wisdom along to other people. So I applaud you for doing this. So answer to the question. It's a great question because I think honestly it's something we don't think about enough. We don't talk about enough. I think there's a terrible confusion in the world, both the business world and the day-to-day world of schools, education, teaching, whatever it might be, sports coaching that misapplies the word leadership to management and management to leadership. Right, so that's kind of my baseline where I always start is when I'm talking about leadership, I'm talking about leadership, right? And to me, leadership is defined by a human experience, fundamentally, right? It's two people who are aligned or pursuing something in common together, simultaneously, in a directed way, in a collaborative way. Like it can take a whole bunch of different shapes and forms, but leadership is the human opportunity to help that other person or persons that you're aligned with or associated with to achieve some objective, right? So for me, everything always comes back to all my stories, all my life experiences, all my business experiences always comes back to people. In our world, we deal with a lot of technology companies and technology people, technology thinkers, in the startup kind of entrepreneurial economies of the Americas and of the planet, so to speak. And those people tend to love product, right, and process, and they get very hyped up about those types of things. And I always just kind of strip through it and come back to it's all about the people. And so to me, leadership has to be human, and then in its application in my life in Growth Hacks, fundamentally the very, very, very stripped down, simple description of what our business is. Without even getting into it's a consulting company and it does this for these types of clients. Like before you even get to that, we're in the business of helping people to become the best versions of themselves as leaders, right? So our clients are fundamentally entrepreneurs and the companies or organizations that they're leading or building. And at the end of the day, we are helping them to both develop external relationships with other people for their purposes to expand themselves or expand their businesses. But in that process, what they learn quickly is what I've been fortunate enough to know for 30 some odd years since I went to work for my dad at age 19, which is that growing a business or growing a network of relationships starts with looking in the mirror and growing the relationship and leading the person that you see in the mirror every day. So that's kind of my answer to like how it applies to our business. It's fundamentally what I live inside of all day, every day on this little Zoom machine and on my phone and an email. It's all about just helping entrepreneurial thinkers. They don't even have to be business owners. They can be entrepreneurial creators, builders. They can be entrepreneurial thinking high school basketball coaches, right? But like working with those types of people to try and help them think about how they can lead other people to get to those objectives that they're trying to get to.
Right, absolutely. And there is such a big difference between leadership and management. And I kind of want to dive into this question of, you talked about like people that have entrepreneurial thinking don't have to be entrepreneurs or business owners. And I'm curious if you could expand more on what that like kind of entrepreneurial thinking kind of means to you.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's funny. It's probably one of the more difficult things to define when we live in this business world, especially, or even now, just the general kind of culture that we exist in globally, where everybody wants everything to be boiled down to like a simple, 5-word description, right? Justin, tell me your story, and I need it in like 130 characters, and it can only fit in this space, and I don't have the attention span to listen to anything beyond that because I really don't understand it, right? Like so this fundamental question of entrepreneurial thinker, being an entrepreneurial thinker versus being an entrepreneur in the stricter definition of the word, I think is the great unlock opportunity for the next 50 to 100 years of human development, right? And in my world, human development just tends to focus on like economic development, but there's a universe beyond that. So to me, I have a phrase that I use a lot when I give speeches. I've been blessed to give a couple hundred speeches around entrepreneurial thinking and the entrepreneurial economy across Latin America in the last 5-6 years. And I always say, like, raise your hand, who in here is going to be an entrepreneur, right? And inevitably, if it's a group of young people and it's 100 or 500 or 1,000, everybody raises their hand, right? And then the next thing I say is, I think, part of the answer to your question, which is, okay, wait a minute. So if literally all of you try and become an entrepreneur, a business owner, start your own thing,
right?
Who are we going to hire to go to work for us to help us build our dreams, right? And so then it's like this. You hear this audible sigh, like of relief in the audience, because people realize that they don't have to be. They can be an entrepreneurial thinker. They can be someone who likes to attack problems with new ways, like that doesn't like the old in the box thinking, that is open-minded and creative. They can be those types of people, and they can even work at entrepreneurially focused organizations or companies or nonprofits or universities that are forward-thinking, that are progressive, that are about the future, not about the past, right? They can be that and feel and act and do their job in their department or on their team very entrepreneurially without ever becoming a business owner.
100%. Yeah, I mean, I resonate with that in a lot of ways, because I think how I have been raised is kind of almost in both ways, where it's like I do see this, like I have the traditional definition, and I'm also learning this new definition as I'm learning and growing. And at first I was like, oh, I have to own the business, it has to be me. But like really, it's like kind of about kind of creating your own life and creating your own freedom and being that free thinker. And I'm curious, with developing that in terms of for young leaders, how do you want to like develop that creative freedom while also like impacting and like serving a greater mission than yourself?
Yeah, I mean, this is almost like a prop, and you'll be glad to know I didn't just do this for you, but right, I have this sitting next to me,
nice.
This book,
Yep.
Right? Simon Sinek's Start with Why.
Yep.
And I'm a nomadic worker, right? Our company is fully remote, fully distributed across the globe, has been from the beginning. We've never had a central headquarters. So in our world, in my day-to-day operating world of our business, literally wherever I set up this stand and this ring light and this computer is the headquarters for our company during the day. But I'll tell you that no matter what kitchen table in an Airbnb or dining room table or co-working space, wherever I am that I set up, when I unpack my backpack, I unpack this book, which I read years ago, but I unpacked this book and I set it right here next to my computer because it's always in my eye line, right? And so that's to me, the first huge lesson for any young person, right? And who is thinking that they want to be a leader or that they have leadership capabilities or a DNA of some type of leadership that they want to explore or try and exploit in their future career or in their future endeavors, right? To me, it all starts with the why, right? I mean, and all kudos to Simon for breaking it down in such a simple way that we could all digest it years ago, right? But it really does start with the why. Like people ask me all the time, I'm 53 years old. And there are times when I'm bringing everything I bring to the world on a daily and weekly basis that at the end of the day or at the end of a week, I'm exhausted, right? And so people are like, oh, you're just like, you're just unique. You have like special gifts. And I'm like, okay, that's kind, thank you. And I may have some superpowers that I've figured out over my life and that I now can harness and use. But at the end of the day, really, it's what gets me up in the morning and what gives me the energy to focus on who I want to lead and how I want to lead and to what effect I want to lead, is knowing that I have a very specific sense of why. I have a very specific kind of prioritized focus on the things that matter to me and the things that I'm passionate about and the places that I want to make an impact. And I lead in those areas. So to the young leader, right, it's, again, leadership management. Let's talk about that in like career context, right? You know, I think long gone are the days where you aspire to be like the middle manager at the big company to collect a paycheck and just, you know, clock. I mean, that was my dad's era, although arguably I was born into that, born in the late 1960s. Right. You're younger than I am, but a little bit older than maybe some of the audience, right? And so you and I kind of bridged that cultural transition. But we live in a world now where I don't care whether you're the hyphenate, multi-interest, Gen Z 23-year-old who is entrepreneur, business owner, content creator, blogger, community organizer. By the way, and maybe also has like a side day job, right?
Right.
I don't care if you're that person or you're the person my age, your age, or in between who says like, I have a company that I'm building or I have a brand that I'm building and that is my singular or near singular purpose. You got to have a very specific why behind why you're going to get up every day and lead in that direction, right? And where I find people that are lost or struggling, and maybe this will resonate with some of the audience, right? Lost, struggling, confused, unsure about what to do next, right? When I dig into that, I tend to be able to get to rather quickly they don't have a really clearly defined why. Right? Or they are pursuing a why that they think is the why they're supposed to be pursuing because they heard it or they saw it or it's FOMO or their parents set this or their brother or their sister or their friend. And so to me, it's a journey. I mean, I'm by the way, let's also be clear. I was like in my mid 40s before I asked myself a very specific question as a result of kind of like a catalyzing series of events that really caused me to want to change life. I asked myself a question, how I wanted to live my life between 45 and 65. And it took me 58 days of asking myself that question every single day, writing it and taping it on my bathroom mirror so I would think about it constantly. It took me 58 days before one day, I spit out a series of 6 very specific answers that I hadn't, they just came out and I was like, yeah, that's how I want to live my life for the next 20 years. And then I started to be able to dig into okay, how do I deconstruct that? How do I organize that? What pieces or components are involved in that? And then it was a process of like building. And then I woke up one day in my early 50s, late 40s in Santiago, Chile, and said to myself, holy crap, check. I think I'm pretty much living the life that I designed with the answer that day in the bathroom. So to your original question again, have a why, be purposeful about how you're using your talents and your energy. It's very tropey now, but live a life or pursue a life with intention. Right, so focusing on I have something that I'm passionate about or that I care about. Affiliate yourself with that. Collect other people, build your tribe of others who share those passions or those interests or those purposeful intentions, right? And then, as the universe does, right, it'll present you opportunities to lead. Right, you don't have to manufacture leadership in a void. You create the life of purpose and intention and surround yourself with others that are like-minded with common interests. And then that will present the opportunity for you to lead others, if that's what you're interested in.
Absolutely. And I kind of want to echo what you're saying. So the first things first is like, instead of like going, like, we're in the age of information, and those that are younger and aspiring to be leaders, and even myself looking up, and we see all these things of, okay, this is a leader online, this is what I have to do, this is what I have to do. But what you're kind of saying is, instead of, looking and looking for the external answers, whether it's Google, Instagram, TikTok, or whatever it is, that we should ask ourselves and kind of design it ourselves and going forward. So I'm curious, you were asking these questions for a series of 58 days, and it kind of finally stuck, and those answers came out to you, and that's kind of a way that you cultivated those answers. So I'm curious, what is that why that fuels you every day, and that design, and of course, you talked about how at the end of the week, even though you're doing what you love, you're still tired because you're still putting in so much energy, pouring into other people, and honestly, pouring into other people is it's draining from time to time. But going back to that why, like, what really fuels you and fires you up?
Yeah, so it's funny, I've got a very aspirational or ambitious view of what's possible in the world. I define myself first and foremost as what I call a pragmatic optimist. So I am and I believe fundamentally all entrepreneurial thinkers, or for sure all entrepreneurial leaders, CEOs, founders, etc., should be pragmatic optimists. And what that means to me is, you are deeply aware of the conditions on the ground around you, but you choose to lean into the possible, right? So we know what's going on, which, by the way, is mostly usually problematic and troublesome and difficult and inefficient, right? The problems that exist around us. We know what they are, but then we're still choosing to lean into what's possible. And so for me, my very ambitious aspirational driver is that and it sounds self-serving or maybe self-aggrandizing, but it's not meant to be, is I literally feel like everything I'm doing is laying the work now, the foundation for the better, I use this phrase all the time, like the better world, like the better new world, or just the better world that we all so desperately need, right? And so in my genre, in my milieu, my canvas that I play on is economic development, right? It's human development through entrepreneurial economic activity. That's my thing. Right, but there are lots of people that play on it from a different canvas, right? From the arts, from education, from sports. We just did our podcast. We recorded an episode of our podcast, which I'll make sure you listen to because you'll love it, with a really good friend, and it's about the storytelling, right? And we even open up with the admission that, like, oh, this is a worn out word, and you probably are like, storytelling, like, it's overused, it's a trope, it's a meme of itself now, right? But the reality is, the way he breaks down and explains it is his purpose, his why, is to tell stories about humanity through the lens of sports, right? So he is both a documentary filmmaker as well as literally a modern day television sports commentator personality that we would recognize, right? But he also is an author. He also is a father. He also is a professional speaker. And so he's a hyphenate guy, right, at 40. But he reminds us in this pursuit of storytelling that, like, we all have our purpose. And in my case, my purpose, I literally believe, is like to help through entrepreneurial economic activity and relationship building and the connection of people across cultures, across languages, across geographies, right, is that those people that I will leave behind, having helped them connect to one another for some very specific purpose, those people will do the work to build the better world that we all desperately need, and that work, Justin, will far, far outlast me. Like, far outlast me, right? I was yesterday talking to a young 22-year-old entrepreneur in Des Moines, Iowa on Zoom. He's 23, Tamarin. And I'm like, all right, you're 23, I'm 53. I'm like, there's 30 years, which I have a 28-year-old daughter, almost 29. So I'm like, so there's like a whole entire person's life in between you and I. And I said, let's just assume that I live another 30 years to 83, right? But then by the time, Tamarin, you get to be 53, my age, I'll be 83. I'll leave this mortal coil to you and everybody else your age, right? And then because of medical advancements and technology and health, you'll probably live to be like 103. which means your life, you and I will have known each other for 30 years, and then you will carry on those relationships, those connections, that wisdom that I passed on to you for another 50 years behind after me, right? That's what I'm doing. And it sounds absurd, right? But like when I wake up in the morning, that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking like, Justin, we meet on Twitter. He seems like a good dude. We have some shared interests. He's curious. And then he wants to do a podcast where he wants to try and pass on lessons to this. Awesome. Because you know what? This podcast is going to be somewhere in a corner of the internet 80 years from now, and someone will be watching it on YouTube, and you may be still around, but I won't be, right? And if that is like a little bit of how I can use 60 or 45 of my minutes out of my day today, like that's a pretty good use of my time. That's a prioritization of my opportunity to be a leader. Now, I'm not leading you today, but you and I together are leading others by sharing knowledge and wisdom and experiences, you know, maybe like the old guys used to do 5,000 years ago, sitting around a fire out in the middle of the desert with, you know, some sticks and a rock, right? So I still think that world exists. I just think that we've been given new tools to try and do that.
Right, and the tools that we have to be able to pass on different stories, different lessons, insights, wisdom is incredible now. And honestly, that's one of the reasons that I'm doing Bridging Impact in the podcast, is to be able to continue sharing this information because, of course, like honestly, self-serving wise, this is really helping me as a leader and as a sports coach, as an entrepreneur, and all these different hats that I wear is I have an opportunity to impact the future. And that's really why I'm creating Impact. And I'm working on with someone who is 30 years older than me, a Discover Your Impact workshop, because I get so excited over helping others discover their impact. And I want to even kind of dive into, you're talking about like your human development is in the economic development world. And I'd love for you to share any stories that you have around some of these relationships that you're building in the Americas and the entrepreneurial and the like stories of connection and possibility, because I feel like those connections and possibility is what helps us pragmatic optimists build a better world.
No, 100%. First of all, thank you for saying that, and that's why you're in the tribe, right? Because you believe in what's possible and you know the power of building bridges. The people, if you were to ask people who knew me or know me what I do or what we do in our business, the first phrase that almost everybody would use universally, whether it's a friend or somebody who's a social media follower or a client who pays us money to work with them in their company, they would say we're bridge builders. And then the second thing they might say is like, you know, in a very American English kind of way, they might say like he's a super connector, right? Like, okay, cool, right? Or like the techie nerd geek, like someone said to me yesterday, was like, you're like a super neural network, and you're like building the nodes of the network, and you're connecting the different nodes. I'm like, all right, that's whatever it is, that's it. Like I say oftentimes like I'm a collector of people. And in my journey, especially in this last 6 years, in the journey of building growth hacks from an idea, a concept here in Los Angeles, to what it's become, which, by the way, not to sound overstated, is still a relatively small company and a small team, and we're growing and we're aspirational, and the next 5 years is going to be better than the last 5 years. But, you know, I also do have to sometimes catch myself and realize the impact that we have and have had and are having. You know, I mean, just to give you some examples, right? So we basically do two things in our business, just to give you a quick summary so you can understand the context, right? We work on kind of the what I'll call the client side, where we work with companies and the founders of those companies or leaders of organizations. They could be venture capitalists, they could be big corporation brands, they could be, you know, funded startups, they could be universities, NGOs, those types of people. Any of those organizations that are playing or participating in what I call the entrepreneurial economy, right? So we work directly with them in helping them expand their relationships, expand their networks. We want to go from we're in Chile, we want to expand to the U.S. We're in Argentina, we want to expand to Colombia. We're in Colombia, we want to expand to Paraguay. We're in Mexico City, but we want to expand to Tijuana, and we don't have any relationships there. Can you help us do that, right? So that's kind of the super non-specific description of what we do. But then the other side of our business is what we call our program management business or our community management business. And so there we work with some of those same organizations, but we work with the universities, the incubators, the accelerators, the communities that exist around entrepreneurship. And we essentially help them do their programming or their events or their curriculum better. Like, so they're doing great work now, we help them do it better. So that has afforded us an incredible opportunity to have what you would describe, and these are some of the stories I'll share with you, which you'll love, like to have a real impact. Like an impact that honestly sometimes on my days, because I'm the founder CEO, and so my brain has to split constantly between the corporate client business and the program management business, and then the internal stuff that we're doing, and then product and program ideas that we have that we like to maybe play with, and the podcast we create. Like, I'm kind of constantly code switching. But if you break it out and you think in the macro, since I went and gave the very first speech that I was invited to give in Latin America, which was in Tijuana in May of 2016, since then we have directly been involved, myself has been directly involved in the personal mentorship of over 4,000, probably closer to 5,000. We've just stopped counting last year. But over 4,000 individual entrepreneurs throughout probably 26 or 27 different countries of the Americas. And when I say the Americas, for people who forgot from geography class, like Latin America is a region that has 33 countries in it. And then if you mix in the US and Canada, that's the Americas. So there's 35 countries in the region. And we've been fortunate enough to work across that. So you think about the incredible exposure and gratitude that I have to being exposed to these people and their stories in the pre-pandemic days, literally meeting them where they were, right? So I spent from 2016 until Christmas of 2019 literally traveling and living 47 to 50 weeks a year throughout 20 some odd different cities in Latin America. So LA is where I've lived for 25 years. I'm originally from Chicago. I went to university and lived in Arizona in Phoenix for 11 years. But this is home, and it has been home for a long time now. But of the last 5-6 years, I was barely here. And I was coming home here as kind of like a taker, right? I was like a vacation visitor in my own city. And we were meeting people in the small towns, the cities, the villages of countries all around Latin America. And then now, since the pandemic, these tools have opened up. They've allowed us to stay connected to those people, right, in those places. But then they've opened up a whole new realm of possibilities to connect with other people in other places and do it at a much greater pace and scale. So you will never hear me complain about Zoom meetings and Zoom and turning the camera on or not turning the camera on or WhatsApp calls, because to me, this is the greatest leap forward in human connectivity that is available ever in my life. And I think it's transformational, and it's only going to continue to get potentially better. Can it be misused? Can it be misapplied? Can it be abused? Of course. That's human nature. That's what we do to everything we touch as a species, right? But does it have immense potential to do more? Yes, because literally I can tell you, I've been able to stay connected to more people in more places since the pandemic started than I would have been before, right? Because I've cut out all I've got to burn 2 days of traveling between this remote city in Mexico and Mexico City, and then back to Los Angeles, right? Or I can only go travel in the city in an Uber to 3 meetings, whereas now I could, if I wanted to or needed to, I could be impactful in 6 or 7 or 8 meetings, right? Now, I shouldn't do that. No one should do that 6 or 7 days a week, right? But if you can do that in a thoughtful way, these tools are incredible. So I've just in so many great human connections and relationships. I mean, I'll give you 3 examples that'll go from years ago to a couple years ago to last night, right? So our business only exists in Latin America at all because a young mid-20-something age guy in late 2015 who was running a business startup incubator in Tijuana, Mexico, somehow saw me on Twitter when I had 97 followers and I followed 11 people and I basically didn't really care about Twitter. I just read it for news occasionally. And he found me and sent me a DM, and that DM said, hey, would you ever be interested in coming to Tijuana, Mexico, and giving a speech about entrepreneurship. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, what?
Right.
Like, I'm like, what? What do you mean entrepreneurship, startup stuff in Tijuana? I'm like, I hate to be the, like, literal meme of like a 50-something-year-old white dude at the time in my 40s, but I was like, but I don't understand. Fast forward, that young, I said yes. Like a couple months later, we're like working out the details, and then that facilitated me being in Tijuana in May, standing in front of a classroom of 500 young engineering students who aspired to be engineering entrepreneurs and invent great tech companies, and talking about entrepreneurship. And then that led to 4 other speeches that week with 4 other organizations in Tijuana, because hell, while I'm here, I might as well, right? And I started learning. And that young man, fast forward, eventually became an employee, and then eventually became a partner in our business, David Bagaro. So literally, we would not be, the original incantation of Growth Hacks was something related, but generally pretty different, and was gonna be focused on American small business. And then he invites me to do that, and then I go down there, and then that spills into 6 months in 2016 of giving 25 speeches in like 6 different cities around Mexico, and realizing, holy cow, wait a minute. The real opportunity for impact, the real opportunity to help mentor the next generation of entrepreneurs, the real opportunity to help the next generation of entrepreneurs and leaders to connect and build more inclusive relationships isn't with my fellow white guys in Silicon Valley or the US. They don't need me. They've already got it figured out. I don't wear a puffy jacket. I don't wear khakis. Like, I didn't go to Harvard or Stanford. Like, I'm not part of that group. They don't need my help. But maybe this part of the world could benefit from my life experiences, right? So that happened. Then I wind up being invited, because of these relationships, to go to Santiago, Chile, and literally live and participate in an entrepreneurial program in Santiago, Chile for a year. And so mid to late 40s-year-old guy literally donates, trashes, sells, or stores everything that I owned, and takes 2 big suitcases and a backpack in 2017 of January and moves to Santiago, Chile. I had never been to South America at that point in my life, at 47, 48 years old, right? And I moved to South America, and the third person that I meet is this 20-something Mexicana from Guadalajara, who just by her presence and by her tone and by her energy reminds me a ton of my now, today, 28-year-old daughter, right? Who I raised by myself in Southern California from her age, like 12-ish on, 13 on forward, right? And this young woman named Ileana Jaime Felix reminds me so much of my daughter Riley that we naturally develop a friendship across generations that is like an Uncle Rob, or as now Latin American entrepreneurs call me, Tio Rob, right? And we developed this friendship. Fast forward, that girl and I have become immense friends. She is essentially an extra daughter. We are family to each other. And in 2020, at the beginning of the pandemic, when I was suddenly bored, stuck in Los Angeles in proper lockdowns, and thought to myself, like, I need to create something. I need to be more. I need to exercise my creative muscle. You know what? Back in 2018, when I was on the road, I dabbled with a podcast idea. Maybe I should bring it back to life. But if I bring it back to life now in 2020, I'm a different version of myself than I was in 2017 and 2018. I understand the world differently and better. If I'm going to do a podcast, I'm going to do a podcast that literally in its production represents the bridging of cultures and generations and geography and all that. And so I called her one night on WhatsApp and I was like, hey buddy, I want to do a podcast. You want to do it with me? And she was like, wait, are you kidding me? Yes, I've always dreamed of something like that. Like, because it's creative and it could be an alternative to my. And so Ileana and I now are 27 episodes and 2.5 years into our own podcast. And it's an incredible way to tighten our relationship and bond us together in a way that was never expected and never would have happened except for this journey. Fast forward to last night's example to cap this off for you. Quick story. We're helping facilitate a mentorship program through our program management business at Growth Hacks with the Mexican national equivalent for American listeners of the American Cancer Society. It's called AMAC, and it's the Mexican Cancer Society, essentially. And they partnered with a family foundation to create a small batch entrepreneurship program for first-time entrepreneurs. And then they brought us in through a friend to facilitate and curate like unique mentorship experiences, right? And so we're bringing mentors from around the world in our network to bear on this so that they can mentor these first-time aspiring entrepreneurs. And I just happened to get lucky enough that one of our mentors had a conflict of schedule, and so my partner David calls me and says, "Hey, can you mentor this person tonight?" The entrepreneur speaks pretty good English, and so it'll be great. They're in a small town in Mexico. I was like, awesome, yeah, happy to. It was one of the most inspiring experiences that I've had in the last couple of years. This 21-year-old person who not only has managed to traverse their own self-discovery to realize around age 18 that they are non-gender conformist, non-binary, and don't identify as either female or male, and to go through that on their own through their teenage years in Mexico, in a Latin culture which is heavily machismo, heavily Catholic, heavily traditionalist and conservative. That in and of itself would be impressive enough. Layer on the fact that they, POW is their name, that they, POW, are building a business around creating dolls that are non-gender specific, non-binary, non-identifying dolls that then can be sold to that community so that those people who went through what they went through will never again feel unrepresented, unseen, unheard. But then layer on top of that the reason she's in this program and that we even met with each other is because this small batch group of a dozen entrepreneurs in this program are all themselves cancer survivors.
Wow.
And so this group with the Mexican Cancer Society has put together this program for one-time cancer survivors who are aspiring or curious about being entrepreneurs, and we're helping facilitate that. So I get to hear this incredible journey of self-discovery from Pao. My apologies. They are 21 years old now, right? And then I get to hear their motivation for the business that they want to build and their why and their community that they want to serve. And on top of that, I get to hear that they were diagnosed with leukemia when they were 6 and then had to endure a decade plus of chemotherapy and treatments and recovery and remission and slipping back in until they were deemed cancer-free at 18. Which was the same year that they came out to their family and to themselves as non-gender specific, not identifying, right? And I'm like, and now I'm meeting Pao at age 21, 3 years later. You know, I gave 25 minutes worth of business advice and tactical next steps, and here's what you're going to do, and here's what's possible, and here's what you should think about, and how much progress have you made, and what have you been working on, and what's next. But I ended the conversation by telling her that I was the one that was grateful, that she had taught me. Right? She had been a leader, even though she demurred and laughed and smiled and I embarrassed them because they don't think of themselves as a leader. I was like, you're literally the type of leader that everybody should aspire to be. Right? You're purposeful, you're intentional, you're about community, you're about being a servant leader, which I think is an important answer to your original question. Right? Like servant leadership has been co-opted by the Christian right in American culture, and like it does. You can be a servant leader without going to church on Sundays. Like you don't have to be an evangelical Christian to be a servant leader, right? Like you can be purposeful and not be Pastor Rick from Saddleback in South Orange County, right? Like you can live these maybe spiritually rooted or even historically religiously connotated things. You can live those in a way that doesn't have anything to do with your religiosity. And to me then be what really, honestly, without getting into a religious podcast, really is the root of it all anyways, which is human kindness and empathy and humanity. And so Pao, to me, was an exceptional leader at 21 years old in Jalapa, in this small town in southern Mexico, far, far away from the big cities and the entrepreneurial economy and the influencers and creators. So you asked for what are some of the stories that I've experienced. I've experienced 3,000 more on top of that I've been so fortunate, but those are three that give you some context of how the business that we're building is helping change lives, but also fundamentally how the business and what we do on a daily basis and what I do has changed my life, without question.
That's amazing. I think it's so that story and talking about not only are they a cancer survivor, like a childhood cancer survivor, but they're also, experiencing coming out and, grappling with gender norms in this, culture that is very against them. And they're representing people who haven't been represented before by creating this business that serves that population. And to back it up a little bit, to almost go to a point I think you were trying to make earlier, is about kind of developing and looking and asking those questions and looking in the mirror about yourself, about the why, and then letting that leadership come and find you. And it's even from you sharing your story about you ending up giving different talks and speeches across Latin America. You had no idea that was going to happen, but you asked those questions about yourself, and then now you're kind of, I also want to talk about the finding, but also this mentorship and this new era of where it's going. And I was doing some research on the Growth Hacks website about like mentorship isn't the traditional like top down, right? It's like you were grateful for that conversation last night because it inspired and impacted you. So it goes both ways, because I know when I work, 100%. when I'm working with youth, whether it's basketball, Boys and Girls Club, substitute teaching, whatever, they end up making an impact on me. I learn a lot about myself. So it goes 100%. Both ways.
100%. I like, to your point, and we didn't touch on this, you and I know this about each other because it's one of the ways we connected via Twitter. So like 5.5 years of my life, when my daughter was in high school, I volunteered as a boys basketball coach here in Southern California. I played basketball growing up. I played for a minute in college in practice, never got the light of day, right? But it was my passion growing up. And I was always looking for ways to give back to the game, and I stayed loosely involved. And then my daughter being in high school and I was a single dad, I was like, okay, wait, like how can I stay involved in her life without appearing to be involved in her life, right? And so I was like, I walked into the gym one day and there was this 20-something-year-old history teacher, right, who was the basketball coach at his alma mater. Right. And I was like, hey, do you need any help? And he was like, hello, stranger. Like, who are you? What do you mean?
Right.
I'm like, well, like, hey, so I played some ball. I've coached a little bit. Like, my daughter's going to high school here now. I don't know. Like, I usually think high school coaches at public high schools usually need some help. I was like, so I've got time. Like, right? And he was like, oh. And so, like, that part of that experience, I always say, like, the kids, the boys that I was a part of their lives, or they were a part of my lives, some are still, in today's world, like, connected via social media, and we still see what's going on in each other's life. But and then, the experience of being a single dad to a teenage girl, I often say in public forums and online, like, my daughter literally helped me become the best version of myself that I am. I'm a much better Rob Ryan and a better man and a better human today than I was before she came into my life 28 years ago. And she and the young people that I've been exposed to, no matter the venue, right? High school basketball coaching, or building a startup, or being the CEO of somebody else's company, or now it's the content world of sharing content on social media, telling my story. I tell a story every day on social media via IG and Facebook and those places, because like you said, it's a cathartic experience for me, right? So like people are, oh, you're so selfless, that's so helpful. And I'm like, yeah, but it started as like something that was purely selfish. Like I was looking for a medium to express my thoughts and express my feelings and find my purpose. And then it just so happens, I guess, that, it made an impact on one person or 5 people or 10 people or, whatever. And so therefore I keep doing it because it still continues to be helpful and valuable to me as an expressive creative outlet, but it apparently also positively impacts other people's lives whom I've never met. And that's an incredible gift and responsibility, right? But it's a gift. So yeah, that we do. We talk about that. We've been talking about it for 6 years in our business. I'm humbled that you read it, right? But we've been saying for years, and now I think the broader economy and the broader structure of professional mentorship or career mentorship, and even personal mentorship, I think is catching up to this idea that, it's not the wise old man, super VIP talking down to the young inexperienced person, telling them what to do and telling them their ideas are stupid and they should do what they say. And like, that's gone, man. I mean, I guess at your age, but like if there was something super interesting or technical or something very unique or new that you wanted to learn, and you said to me, hey, Rob, do you know anybody that can help me figure this stuff out? Like, and the newest stuff, on the cutting edge stuff today, Web3, NFTs, crypto, all this kind of stuff, the people that I would introduce you to mentor you would probably be people in my network between the ages of like 20 and 26, right? And so they'd be mentoring, as we call it at Growth Hacks, mentoring up, right? Which is no different than, 40 years ago, management culture was talking about managing up, right? And that was a requirement of like a career corporate job, right? And then we kind of forgot about it, and mentorship just became like, well, whoever says yes to hey, you want to help mentor these people? Like, if you say yes, that means you're a good mentor, which is terribly untrue, right?
Right.
And then it was always this top-down, senior to junior kind of experience, and that's also just bullshit. Like, we live in a world where there's too much knowledge. I mean, this stuff connected us and made us the most, knowledge accessible people in the history of mankind. Whether or not we're using the knowledge well enough is a different question, but like, to me, the world is just too fragmented and too broad to think that it's only the older people that can mentor the younger people. Like, to me, it's this constant opportunity. As a testament to that, Justin, I had my team do some research, kind of putting together some numbers last year just to see if what I thought about my relationship network was actually true, and it turns out it is. Like, so of all my points of connection, 20 some odd thousand, whatever. I'm not like some million follower guy, so that's not on the table. But like real relationship connection points through all the different social platforms. Like, I know who these people are. There's like 20 some odd thousand or something. 64% of that are people under the age of 37.
I'm one of them.
Right? So like 53-year-old white guy, gringo, right?
Yeah.
Like literally intentionally. A couple weeks ago, you may have seen it. They have that chirpy thing on Twitter where you can do like an image, like a screenshot of your network, like it does like a little analysis, right? And then it posts like a circular picture of like your inner circle and your next. Right. And I think it encompasses like 50 or 60 people. And I love it. It's a cool little tool. And so I did one because somebody else had done it. And so I was like, thought about mine. And I was like, I wonder who's in mine, like lately. And so I did it. And then it struck me. And so then I wrote a little tiny thread about it because it struck me that of the 49 or 50 people that were in that, and I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but like 4 or 5 were, or 3 or 4 were white guys, like of my age bracket, and then like 27 or 28 were women, right? And then of those of the overall numbers, like some like 30-40% were LGBTQ. Or 30-40%, no, I think 50% maybe, or 60% were brown or black entrepreneurs or creators or business people that I'm friends with that I know. And I was so moved by that, not because it was like, hey, look at me, virtue signaling, like I'm so cool.
Right.
But it was such like a real manifestation of my intentions. Just like last year when I asked my team, hey, do the analysis of the whole network, look at them all and tell me, is my network skewing a lot younger than most people's, like, or than I think? Like, I think it's pretty young, and I think that's what's fueling me, right? And so that's it all. To me, it's like we should all stop and check ourselves to make sure that the intentions that we're speaking about we want to do, and the way we want to lead, and the way we want to present or activate in the real world. Like, check yourself every once in a while. Like, use these little crazy quippy things that are out there, these tools, to like do a quick check on your own network and hey man, let's be blunt. Like, don't be the guy or girl who says, I'm all about this, this, and this. And then when we actually look at your data, you're not, right? Like, don't be that. Like, and so to me, use the tools that are available to kind of check your privilege and to check your authenticity. And then if you're not where you want to be, if your words and deeds, as they used to say, right, aren't matching, then fix it. Then like adjust it, man. Like lean into like, okay, if you're saying this is what you want to be, but actually you haven't gotten there yet, well then it's like anything else. Like just get better at it. You want to lose weight, you want to you go to the gym more, right? Like so yeah. So I think those are important lessons that I've learned, but also could be useful specifically for folks.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I couldn't agree more. And there's that difference between intention and impact. What is that? And what are your intentions actually impacting? And being honest and reflective and authentic about all of that. And I'm sure we could probably continue talking for hours, but I will also want to be mindful of time. And you know, as we're wrapping up this podcast, do you have any like final parting words of advice to the young leaders, coaches, teachers out there? And any resources? You talked a little bit about how to find your why, Simon Sinek, and also where can people find you?
Yeah, no, great question. I think rather than repeat a lot of what we said, I think it's maybe just more summary, right? I think lean into some of those big anchor themes that we've talked about today, right? Intentionality, and I know it sounds repetitive and pedantic because so many people use these words nowadays, but the reality is, obviously, we're not all executing on them because we have to keep repeating them for ourselves, right? So be intentional, be purposeful. Maybe this is an anecdotal way I can answer it. Like, don't come to me or go to anybody in your life or tell yourself in the mirror, like, hey, I want to start a podcast. Like or I want to build a software company, or I want to start this community. Like, I want to, be an influencer. Whatever the thing I want to be answer might be. To me, it's more about like what I always ask people next, which is like, oh, why do you want to start a podcast? Right? Like, oh, you want to build a software company? Like, why? Like you want to build a community around this? Like, why? Because I think if we asked ourselves that more often, like, because I'll tell you, if the answer is, well, I just think it'd be cool to do a podcast, or I think podcasters are cool and I want to be famous and cool like them, then I'm going to probably tell you, like, don't bother doing a podcast. Like, go do something else with your time. Right? Because that's not, like, or the same thing. Like, I want to build a software company because, everybody builds software companies, and guys that build software companies and sell them get rich. It's like, all right, that's not going to work. I'm going to tell you right now, you're going to fail. Right. Like, you might get lucky, like winning the lottery lucky, or like winning a slot hand at Vegas lucky. Yeah. Like, that happens, but it ain't going to happen repetitively. So, if at 25 or 30 you're saying, like, I want to do this, or I want to be a basketball coach because, like, I used to be a player and, like, I want to be in charge. I want to be the boss. Like, that's a terrible, shitty reason to choose to be a high school or a college basketball coach, right? Like, do it because basketball is, like, integral to your life and you want to give something back to it. Do the podcast because you have an intention to it, right? And then just do it. By the way, do it like you're doing, Justin, which I applaud. Like, just do it. Like, don't do it and then stop and worry if 12 people listened or if 27 people listened. Or I have a phrase I use with my co-creator on our podcast all the time. And our podcast is small. Like, sometimes we have a whole bunch of people listen. Sometimes we have a few. And I joke with her every time. And I'm like, but imagine, have you ever had like 97 people show up at your apartment in Guadalajara and like squeeze into your living room to stare at you and hang on every word that you're sharing? I was like, imagine that power. Whether that number is 3 or 100 or 10 or 37 or 10, it doesn't matter. Like, imagine 3 strangers knocking on your door right now and saying, I want to stand here while Rob and Justin have this conversation. That's an incredible gift to yourself and to those 3 people. So just do it. Just do the work of whatever it is that you decide it is that you're focused on, that you want to lead in. Just do the work. And then, as we said before, as you highlighted again, which I think is a great lesson for us in life, perspective, is like, life will present the opportunities for you to exercise that leadership, right? There's an old story, you can attribute it to a whole bunch of different places, about this idea, hey, I prayed and I asked God for patience, Like, what the hell, God? Like, the next 3 weeks were just a shitstorm, and they were stressful, and they were so crazy, and like everything went wrong. And it's like, God looks down and goes, well, yeah, you asked me for better. Like, you wanted to be more patient. You asked me for strength. You prayed for strength. So I presented you with opportunities that would require you to be more patient. I presented you with problems that would require you to become stronger. Like, it's not like it's not like you had a box with a Tiffany's bow on it. Like, here's strength.
Yeah.
So same with leadership, right? Leadership is not a vacuum. It's a thing that comes out of the lives we lead. So how can you find us to keep going on with these stories? You can find me on social media now, on YouTube and on Twitter, LinkedIn, all the different platforms. On most of them, like Twitter, and I think on YouTube, like it's I am Rob Ryan. So it's just my name that you see here on the video screen, but just with an IAM, and then squeeze it all together. You can find Growth Hacks, GrowthHax.com on the web, and or again on social media, all the same platforms. We're everywhere that you would imagine. And then our podcast is called Mentors Today, and you can find that, it's just at Mentors Today, one word. You can find that on all your favorite podcast listening platforms. And it's a conversation mostly about entrepreneurial economy stuff and the bridges between Latin America and the US. But we talk to a lot of interesting, fascinating people that are exponentially smarter than Ileana and I, and we're just trying to share their stories to inspire a next generation of what's possible, right? Of what's possible in this world, so that hopefully we wind up with a better version of it than we started with. My mom used to say, Justin, when you enter a room or you leave a room, like leave it and the people in it better than when you found them. And I've kind of, in my parents, RIP, rest in peace to both of them decades ago, but like I say, like that's kind of my mantra in life. Like I'm basically trying to leave every room in my life and every group of people that we interact with a little bit better than we found them. So
I couldn't agree more. That's exactly my philosophy. So I appreciate your time so much today, Rob, and I look forward to getting this episode out and sharing with the people and continuing to make the world a better place together.
Love it, man. Keep bridging that impact, man.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Bridging Impact Podcast. We'd love it if you would like, subscribe, leave a comment and a review on whatever platform you're on. It's the best way to help us grow. We appreciate you for doing that. We'll shout you out on social media. I'd also love if you connected with me on social media. Let me know your thoughts, and this is why I do it. I want to share knowledge and wisdom from experienced leaders to people like yourself and myself, so we can have this dialogue and move forward, make an impact on the world. So stay tuned, stay subscribed. Cheers.